Welcome back to Creating Cooperative Kids. I'm your host, Bill Corbett. Temperament refers to the particular aspects of a child's nature or personality that can make them either easy or a challenge to raise. For example, if a child measures low on adaptability, it may become a huge challenge to introduce him to new things. Now, if a child measures high on sensitivity, it could be a challenge for her to concentrate. What this means is that some general parenting methods could be difficult to use with some children, requiring that the parents of these children have more education and additional tools. My next guest has some experience and insight in raising a more sensitive child. Julie Rosenshein is a licensed psychotherapist and certified school social worker. She graduated from Columbia University and has been featured on the A&E Network and CNN. She's the author of the book, Parenting the Highly Sensitive Child, a guide for parents and caregivers of ADHD, indigo, and highly sensitive children. I met Julie about 5 or 6 years ago when she released the first edition of her book and loved what I learned at her lecture. Welcome to the show, Julie. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks so much, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here.
So now the new edition of your book is out, and I am meeting more and more parents with sensitive children. And of course, parents are in a rat race. They got to get things done. They got to get over here. They get over there, and they're under incredible pressure. But when they're dealing with a highly sensitive child, it can change everything, right?
Absolutely. You know, we're under a lot of stress already, and when we have a highly sensitive child, which I'll explain later on what that even means, that kind of push can only push that child more and more into a stressful situation without the tools that they need.
So one of the things I noticed in your book, Julie, was that when you're talking about the sensitive child, and I'm going to ask you in a minute to define it, the first thing that occurred to me was that I noticed that I can't concentrate if there's a littlest noise in the room. If I can hear the clock ticking, I can't concentrate. I remember in school taking exams, and I couldn't concentrate because I could just keep hearing the ticking of that clock. Is that what it means to be sensitive?
Well, that's one kind of sensitivity, and we're seeing a lot of that's getting reported by teachers. The kid can't focus, the kid's hyperactive, the kid's this, the kid's that. But actually, temperament has a lot to do with that. And it was interesting because growing up, I too had a lot of these characteristics that I had no idea were really the characteristics of a highly sensitive child.
So let's define what
Sure.
does it mean to be a highly sensitive child?
So I really divide into 4 main categories. The physical sensitivities are children that are really physically sensitive. They might be allergic to certain foods they're eating. They might be sensitive to noise, sensitive to touch, have sensory integration issues. They might have a hard time with certain kinds of lights, like fluorescent lights. And they also might really be craving the exact foods that they're allergic to, which puts them in this constant battle of, or really kind of a circle of craving the thing that they're allergic to, being allergic, craving the thing they're allergic to. And we see a lot of mood swings that come out of that kind of physical and allergic reactions.
Is the indigo child considered a sensitive child?
Yes, but that would really fall under my second category that I call emotional sensitivity or spiritual sensitivity, the second and third categories. Emotional sensitivity would be the kind of kid who is in the playground, somebody gets hurt, and there the counselor who goes over has the big heart, has the big feelings. This is the kid who is really angry or really sad or very lonely, or the kid that asks these deep, profound questions. And they're like wise children, but they have such big hearts, and they have such big feelings that sometimes they can't even contain those feelings. So as a parent, you don't know what to do with a child when their feelings are so big. It's hard for a child to regulate themselves emotionally anyway, but when they're feeling their feelings on such a deep level, we have to really understand how it is that we can help these children so that they can be a child that has friends, that functions well in the world, and that doesn't feel isolated from other kids.
And I can see one of the clashes that takes place is you get parents. First of all, when we were little, a lot of us weren't allowed to be emotional.
Right.
And some of us were sensitive back then,
Yes.
and the parents said, suck it up, knock it off. You cut it out. You want to
Yes.
cry? I'll give you something to cry about, right?
Absolutely.
So then we were trained to keep everything inside, and then now, in this day and age, we have a sensitive child. And we
Yeah.
don't know what to do. And sometimes parents have even told me that they feel resentful towards their parents because they weren't allowed to feel, and now they have a child it's highly sensitive, and they're not equipped to deal with it.
Yes. Well, one of the main things people people will say to me after they read the book, they say, "Where were you when I was a kid?" And I said, "I was a kid too, just learning how to write this book because I was going through my own sensitivities." It's the kind of child that people will say, "He's just so sensitive," as if it's a death sentence or something, as if it's a horrible thing to be sensitive. In the world that I'm living in today, I wish we could all be more sensitive. So these kids are really, those emotionally sensitive kids are kids that we can really learn from.
Now, you named it.
So there's 2 categories so far.
2 categories so far.
So the third one would be spiritual sensitivity. Are you ready for this, Bill?
Okay.
Are you sure?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So we have children that are, they might be labeled indigo children, but what that means really is that they're spiritually sensitive, that they have the kind of spirit that picks up on some of the things that some of us are a little afraid to talk about, or what I call the woo-woo. And these are the kinds of kids, and I work with these children in my private practice all the time. So it exists. No one's making this up. They see angels. They might see deceased loved ones or people who are in spirit already. They can often see the color around a person, what's called the aura.
The aura.
They're intuitive. They can be psychic. They can know about world events before they happen. And they pick up the energy of the planet. So these are the kinds of kids that really need help because they don't know sometimes what's going on for themselves. The parent gets very scared. And what's worse is that sometimes these kinds of children end up in psychiatrist's office, being put on medication, being put in hospitals, or not really being understood. And it's not like you were going to go into your 3rd grade class saying, "I see dead people." So they really need help having tips and tools for the child and the parent on how do you have gifts like that and exist in what's more of the normal world.
And a lot of that gets crushed too, and they get shut down because parents aren't equipped or ready to deal with that. Is there a 4th category?
Yeah, and before I get to that 4th category, I will tell you that when these kids are shamed, they shut their gifts down. When I appeared on, I guess it was CNN that did a special on psychic children, I thought that I would get emails or calls from parents who had children who were psychically gifted. Well, what happened after that was amazing. It was all these parents who called saying, "I was the kind of kid that you talked about, and I was shamed, so I shut all of my spiritual gifts down." So we have to learn how to not shame these gifts. And we talk about emotional intelligence. There's such a thing as spiritual intelligence too. So, and then the last category would be socially or transitionally sensitive. And these are the kinds of kids that are very anxious in transitions or in social situations. The kind of kid that doesn't want to go on a sleepover, that might be really, really anxious when something changes at their school, when they get a substitute teacher, when there's a special play at school and the whole schedule changes. These are the kinds of kids that will act out, not because they want to, but because their anxiety level is so high that their sensory system is overloaded.
So with that kind of child, what can parents do specifically? Because I've run into a lot of parents with those kinds of children. What can they do to help that child transition better?
Yeah, well, what we're seeing is that anxious children are becoming the thing that's so common to see happening younger and younger and younger in our kids. So 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade age children are having these anxieties. What I talk about is, as tips or tools, would be, number 1, rehearse situations with your child. Number 2, have a way of communicating with them about this. And if the child is young, I do something called the worryometer. It's like a thermometer, but I teach kids how to sort of color in how much worry is happening. I also teach parents how to have a worry jar at home so that when the kid is starting to worry about something coming up, they can write that thing down and put it in the worry jar. When they start thinking about it, they can actually say to themselves, it's in the jar, I don't need to think about it. All of these strategies are actually in the tips and tools section of my book, and it kind of lays out very down-to-earth, easy solutions that you can try with your kids.
Parents, I tell you, I wouldn't want to be a parent of a young child today, because it's almost like a new breed, and some parents aren't willing to accept it, and they shut it down, they get frustrated, and they come to us, parent educators, for help. But we hope that parents listening and watching the show can take a second look at your child, because you may have a sensitive child, and there's things that you can do to help them in different capacities. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Julie. It was great to have you here.
Thank you
and
so
to
much.
see you after so many years.
I know. It was a pleasure.
Research has shown us that one particular old-fashioned parenting tool that many parents still use can be destructive in so many ways: spanking. It is so destructive that it can lead to depression and teach children to lie and hide their mistakes. Coming up in my next segment, I'm going to ask my guests to come back on the set and help me tackle this. And let's examine this, because sometimes it can be tricky, a topic and a thing that we can help parents with some alternatives to spanking. Don't touch that remote. We'll be right back after a short break.